everyone, my name's Amy, and on behalf of the Academic Writing Education Center, I welcome you to Reading to Connect. In our Week 5 lesson, this week we'll be focusing on the topic of review and reflect. So let's start. In today's lesson, we'll be looking at the scales of reviewing your text as well as how to reflect on the text to create meaning. When we talk about reviewing text, we're basically going over to the material you just read. You're going to be doing some note-taking of the main idea, main argument, and other important bits that you find useful. We'll be using strategies such as note-taking, summarizing, and paraphrasing. With reflect, we're basically integrating our personal opinion with the reading we just done and be able to form those opinions critically. We'll be using strategies such as reading responses, making inferences, and drawing conclusions. So, we're going to begin with a little bit of exercise. Now, I'm going to spend 3 minutes, read through this text talking about binary systems, and then we're going to answer some questions. Good luck. Binary systems. Black and white, masculine and feminine, rich and poor, straight and gay, able-bodied and disabled. Binaries are social constructs composed of two parts that are framed as absolute and unchanging opposites. Binary systems reflect the integration of these oppositional ideas into our culture. This results in an exaggeration of differences between social groups until they are seen to have nothing in common. An example of this is the phrase, "Men are from Mars, women are from Venus." Idea of men and women being complete opposite invites simplistic comparison that relies on stereotypes. Men are practical, women are emotional, men are strong, women are weak, men lead, women support. Binary notions mask the complicated realities and variety in the realm of social identity. They also erase the existence of individuals such as multiracial mixed-race people and people with non-binary gender identities who may identify with neither of the assumed categories or with multiple categories. We know very well that men have emotions and that women have physical strength. But a binary perspective of gender prefigures men and women to have nothing in common. They are defined against each other. Men are defined in part as not women, and women as not men. Thus, our understandings of men are influenced by our understanding of women. Rather than seeing an aspect of identity like race, gender, class, ability, and sexuality as containing only two dichotomous, opposing categories, conceptualizing multiple various identities allow us to examine how men and women, black and white, etc., may not be so completely different after all, and how varied and complex identities and lives can be. So how's your reading? Are you ready? Did you understood it? Let's start. The first question is, what is the topic about? Should be quite simple. The keywords keep appearing. It will be talking about gender binary system. The second question poses a bit of more of a challenge. What can you infer about the binary system based on the passage? So the answers could be more than one. The first, it could be that binaries are essentially two opposing ideas or concepts. They could be groups or categories that are against each other. So that's more of a definition of what binary system is. The second inference that we can make from the passage is that binary thinking can cause biases towards a specific group of people through labeling. So that is something that you can get from the passage as well, based on the content. The third inference we can make is that the structure of binary system, it could limit diversity or the opportunity for a multiple perspective. The last inference we can make is based on the content of the reading that it told us that the author actually disagrees with the idea of binary system. Let's move on to the third question. What can you infer about binary gender roles? Again, this could have multiple answers. First, a binary gender perspective fails to acknowledge multiple varied identities in the real world, such as being transgendered. This is something that was quite evident in the reading, and you should be able to catch it. The second is that the commonality between men and women has been ignored. In the reading, it repeats to say that a lot of the commonalities are actually shared by both men and women, but they are not acknowledged. Let's move on to the fourth question. What kind of conclusion can you draw based on the inferences? With that, we're looking at the attitude of the author. So the author suggests that a broader sense of what binary system is would help us to have a more inclusive perspective about gender identity, and that this action is actually essential. So based on the fourth question above, did you understood the reading? Were you able to grasp the true meanings? Having read the exercise above, we're now going to go into the different strategies that we can use to help us better grasp the meaning of the text. The first skill we're going to practice is review. So to review, we can try several different steps to help us digest the information that we have on hand and be able to store it for our long-term memory and for future use. Number one is note-taking. Now, a good note-taking strategy is essential, especially when we are undergoing our academic study. The reason for that is because for most of our courses, it actually requires us to read a large quantity of materials. Good note-taking would help us to organize our materials effectively and be able to use that for our future reference. So what are the benefits of good note-taking? Number one, it organizes our information in a logical way. Number two, it keeps a record so you don't lose it in the future. And obviously, when you need it, you can locate it easily. Number three, during the process of note-taking, we're able to think critically about what you have just read to be able to redigest it again. Number four, during note-taking, we're able to draw conclusions and identify main ideas from the text. Number five, note-taking helps you to become mentally and physically prepared for class. Furthermore, during lectures, it will help you to better comprehend the lecture's content because you already had a solid foundation. Number six, it helps you to focus on the main ideas and the concepts that are outlined in the text. And so during the process of note-taking, we need to know that there's no one way to note-take. Everyone takes their notes differently. So whichever one is more effective for you, that is the one you should go for. In today's lesson, we're going to introduce you several different types of note-taking skills that you may be able to apply in your daily note-taking. Number one, we're looking at mind mapping. So the idea of mind mapping is sort of organizing this text into different blocks. With these different blocks, they can present different topics or subtopics with different main ideas. So let's look at this mind mapping even closer. We can see that based on the reading we've just done, binary system is right in the middle. That is our main topic. With that in mind, I have separated the idea of this text into a few different blocks. The first block I have is social classification. So based on the reading, I know that under social justification, there are several different categories, such as men versus women, poor versus the rich, or black versus the white. And the other block that I've gathered from this reading are the solutions to this binary problem, as well as the consequences to these problems. So when we look at the idea of mind mapping as your note-taking skills, it's about separating the idea of this text based on what your understanding of it is, or based on the structure of the reading, whichever one you prefer. The second type of note-taking could be a process. What that means is that perhaps your reading is organized chronologically or through a cause and effect chain. Let's look at the screen. The example given here talks about energy metabolism. So what begins? It began at the sun. Then it goes to the plant absorbing the energy from the sun, and then it goes to those who consume these plants, and then it goes to the decomposers that decomposes these animals, and then it goes to heat being produced. This is a process that is organized based on the sequence of events. So again, depending on the type of text you have, or depending on how the text is organized, you may choose to use this type of process organization in your note-taking. Now, the next type of note-taking could be what you see on the screen. You have two different topics, and then you see what their overlap. Usually, with this particular type of note-taking, you're talking about topics that are either very similar in their nature, So you have option A and B. Perhaps they're both talking about cats, but different cats. Hence, you're talking about the differences, and where they overlap, you're talking about their similarities. Or that you're talking about things that have contrastive natures, however, they still do share similarity. So again, it depends on the organization of your text and how the text interacts with each other and what their relationships are. Now, further to our note-taking skills, the different type of note-taking we just seen are more of a visual note-taking skills. So this has to do with what kind of person you are. Are you more of a text person or are you more of a picture person? So depending on how your brain functions, so let's say the note-taking skill that are done through visualization, which are the ones we just talked about, does not work as well for you. We can also try the text way. So the first type of note-taking skills are done through text only is outlining. Usually, outlining involves you to organize your information based on the main points and the supporting details. An outlining type of note-taking skill would also allow you to use perhaps indentations or numbering to help you organize your ideas even better. Now, generally, in a paragraph, we know that it usually begins with an opening statement, a topic sentence, followed by main ideas, supporting detail, and at the end, a concluding sentence. Obviously, if this was a longer text, a thesis statement involved an individual topic sentence for each main argument. And so what we're going to do now is that we're going to read an article together. What you need to do is apply the outlining skill we just talked about. During the process of writing, I need you to identify where is the topic sentence and what is it? Where are the main ideas? What are the sub-ideas that supports the main ideas? So spend a bit of time, read through the article, and then we're going to come back and see whether or not you have used this outlining skills effectively. Good luck! Cell phone use and academic performance. Cell phones are an integral part of college life and culture. Even a casual observation of today's college students will reveal cell phones being used both overtly and covertly in every possible campus setting, including the classroom. Research suggests that college students frequently use a cell phone during class time despite rule against doing so. As cell phone technology continues its rapid development, the device appears capable of contributing to student learning and improved academic performance. For example, modern smartphones provide students with immediate, portable access to many of the same education-enhancing capability as an internet-connected computer, such as online information retrieval, file sharing, and interacting with professors and fellow students. Conversely, recent research suggests that many college students perceive the cell phone primarily as a leisure device, and most commonly use cell phone for social networking, surfing the internet, watching videos, and playing games. If typically utilized for leisure rather than education, then cell phones may disrupt learning within academic settings. Thus, the potential relationship between cell phone use and academic performance is not clear. Welcome back. How did you do? Let's see whether or not you have successfully identified the topic, the main idea, the supporting details, as well as the concluding sentence of the text you've just read. First, let's begin with the topic. So the topic of this reading, quite simple, is cell phone use in college life. What about the main idea? The main idea of this text is that cell phones are an integral part of college life and in our culture. Having identified the main idea, we need to find the supporting details. Now, there are two supporting details in this text that are provided to support the main idea. Number one is that cell phones are capable of contributing to students' learning and their academic performances. And with that in mind, the further smaller supporting evidence that supports this particular supporting detail is that one, the immediate access to many of the same education-enhancing capability, and number two, the online information retrieval, file sharing, and interacting with professor and fellow students. They both contribute to students' learning outcome as well as their academic performances. Let's look at supporting detail number two. It talks about how cell phone may disrupt their learning within an academic setting. And to support this particular point, two further explanations are inputted, namely that cell phone is primarily used for leisure services instead of using it just for academic purposes. Number two is that cell phones are often used simply for social networking, surfing the internet, watching videos, and playing games, both supporting details going back to how cell phones are not just used for academic settings. Now, the last bit of the outline, the conclusion. We can see from the text that the conclusion is that the potential relationship between cell phone use and academic performances is unclear. That is the opinion of the author that expressed at the end of the text. Now that we have just practiced how to use outlining during reading as part of your note-taking, we're going to introduce to you the dialectic note-taking skill. So dialectic note-taking skill is essentially a discussion or dialogue between two parties. It can be the opposing little angels and demon that stands on the shoulder and talks to you while you're reading. With these particular type of note-taking skills, because you have two different sets of opinion, it can actually challenge you to think more critically of the ideas that are presented in the reading. Now, how you can go ahead with this particular note-taking skill is that you're going to draw a line down right in the middle of your notepad or obviously your iPad. And then you're going to create two long columns. It could look like this. So one side of it could be the author's opinion, while the other side is actually your own opinion. During the process of this dialectic note-taking skills, you're going to be evaluating the opinions and the arguments that the author has delivered while contrasting it with your own. So the authors could be presenting their main arguments or main ideas while you challenge them in the other column, whether or not you follow their logic, or whether or not they sound believable. With this particular type of note-taking skill, it helps you to see the pattern and the connection that the reading is making. Now, by finding these connections, it could make a very strong argument for your own writing assignment when you're seeking out citation or references. Now, you need to be aware. If let's say during this process of dialectic note-taking skill that you're drawing down important bits from the reading directly, you must ensure to include a quotation of where you found this particular quote, as well as page number or the date that you've accessed it, if you accessed it online, to avoid plagiarism. That is a topic that we'll discuss in later weeks. Now we're going to go into detail on how to take notes, in particular for journals. Now, journals or academic articles have a very different approach in comparison to other type of texts. For example, with science journals, usually the structure will go through the IMRD method. I, which stands for introduction, M, which stands for methodology, R, which stands for results, and D, which stands for discussion. With that in mind, let me introduce you a template that you may use and is especially helpful when you are taking notes for journals. So you will see that we're using a chart. With these charts, there are actually different columns that represent different items that you see in the journal article. The number one is you're going to identify the general and the subtopic that are discussed in the journal, because obviously within the research, there are many different components and sections, and it may be complicated for you to organize it at the beginning. So by using a chart and by using different subheadings, it will help you to better distinguish point from point, argument from argument, or evidences from evidences. Then in this particular note-taking style for journals, we're going to be looking at the background. By that means is, for example, what are the significance of this study? Has it been studied before? When you're raising questions like this and you're drawing them down, distinguish them from the main point, it helps you to better clarify the logic of the author. Then we go on to the literature review. What are the key researches that are cited? And what are the gap statements? Essentially, what are the holes that the research is trying to fill? Next, you need to determine the research questions and the purpose of the study, allowing the aim of the study to be clearly presented. Then you need to go to the research designs and methods. For example, what are the data sources? Who are the participants? And what other design are involved in this experiment or in this study? Obviously, the process and procedure of the research is also critical during the note-taking of journal articles. Now you need to ensure that you include the key results in as well. For example, what highlights has emerged from this particular study, as well as were there any surprises that were actually presented in the research. At last, you need to also put in the discussions and conclusions that are made in the research. For example, what are the author's main arguments? Are there any further implications or possible application of the research? Then we go on to the significance of this result. What are the contributions of the author that has done to the academic world or to this particular field study? At the end, you need to make sure you reflect critically on it as well. So having read this particular article, what are your thoughts and what are your opinions? Now with the review, what you can also do text-wise is that you can write a summary. A summary is basically an overview of the text. You're including the main ideas of the text in it, but what you want to do is that you want to avoid copying it word by word during the process of writing. Because what happens when you copy it word by word is that you could potentially fall in the trap of plagiarism. Especially if you wish to use this summary later in your assignments, this is definitely something you want to avoid. So how do we compose a good summary? Number one, to avoid plagiarism, we must identify who the author is and where did the text came from. Next, a good summary must state the objective of the text as well as its main points. You need to be aware to not include your own personal opinions or your own personal perspective during the process of writing a summary. Because what happens then is that you change the meaning of the author and it could potentially compromise the quality of your assignment later. A good summary should be shorter than the original text and not to include any minor detail with specific examples that are raised in the text. When you're writing a summary, you may include keywords or jargons that are specific to the original text. Now, we're going to try this again. You're going to read the same binary system text one more time, and then what we're going to do is that we're going to look through two different summaries. You are going to determine, based on your reading and your understanding, as well as how you have grasped the meaning of the author, which is the better summary. Let's go. So, after reading the text for the second time, did you understand more of what the author is trying to say? Are you ready? We're now going to show you two different summaries, and you are going to tell me, based on what we just talked about, what a good summary should do, which summary is better. Let's go. The author in this article discusses the social construction of a fixed, exaggerated binary opposition and the consequences of such binary systems. It is noted that this binary perspective has not only reduced complex realities to simplistic and dualistic choices, but also fails to acknowledge the multiplicity of social identities. The author concludes the article by suggesting that we should move beyond binary oppositional thinking and explore multiple aspects of identities in our world. The idea of binary opposition between two social groups encourages simplistic comparison and rigidly fixed categories through an exaggeration of their differences, such as that men are practical and women are emotional, men are strong and women are weak, men lead and women support. This binary notion creates several consequences. First, it does not reveal the true reality and variety in social identity. In addition, it ignores multiple categories of gender identities. For example, there are transgenders, multi-gender identity, and cisgenders. Clearly, this narrow-minded fixed idea of gender identity will further reinforce the conflicts between social groups. So how was your reading? We're going to see now which one is the better summary. Was it A or was it B? The answer should be A. So why is A better? A is the better summary because it includes an overview of the main arguments. And it has only included the main ideas without any of the minor supporting details, as a good summary should do. So what is wrong with B summary then? First, B summary did not identify the source of the article, and it included unnecessary details in the text, which a good summary shouldn't do. At the very end of the summary, it also included the personal opinion of the person who read the original text, which we mentioned before is not something that you should do when you are writing a summary because you do not want to compromise the author's opinion with your own perspectives. Now we just talked about reviewing skills through note-taking and mind mapping, outlining, dialectic note-taking, as well as note-taking for journals. What we are going to do now is that we're going to try and see whether or not we can effectively utilize these skills into our reading. I'm going to give you a few minutes. You're going to read an article about GM crops, genetically modified crops. So the title of this article is Don't Fear GM Crops. They could help solve the sustainability crisis. Now, please read the article and use one of the methods that we just talked about. But obviously, if you have more time, you can try all of them to see whether or not you have grasped them correctly. Good luck and let's go. Don't fear GM crops. They could help solve the sustainability crisis. Modified crops are nothing to be scared of and could be essential in solving the global sustainability crisis, explained Dr. James Lloyd, Deputy Field Chief Editor for Plant Biotechnology in the open access journal Frontier in Planet Science. Much of southern Africa is currently suffering consecutive seasons of drought, and farmers in eastern Kenya have lost more than 80% of their crops due to lack of rain. These droughts caused by climate change could potentially leave 36 million people across Africa facing hunger. However, there is hope in drought-resistant crops. Over a 5-year period, a total of 2.9 million farmers in 13 African countries saw their yield increase by 20 to 30% after sowing a variety of drought-tolerant hybrids. I think that using this type of technology has huge potential to increase crop yields, and I would be optimistic that we can increase food production as we need to in the next year or so, he added. Making modified starch more eco-friendly. Dr. Loy and his team, who are based in South Africa, have currently been working on increasing the amount of phosphate that's bound to starch by manipulating plant genes. Modified starch is used by the paper and food industry, and in Europe alone is predicted to be worth $2.89 billion by 2020. A lot of starch is modified by nasty chemicals. If we can remove these processes by altering it in the plant, then we can rid of a load of those environmentally damaged processes, he explained. At the moment, most starch used by industry doesn't have any phosphate on it. There are some plants that have a high level of phosphate, and we've managed to increase this to even greater amounts. He explained he would love to see these products come to market. Feeding a hungry world. Modified crops also have the potential to tackle a possible impending food crisis. The world currently has a population of 7 billion, and that is estimated to rise over 9 billion by 2050. Clearly, we're going to have to produce more food on less land, he said. We have to try to make plants that can help small-scale farmers use less land to produce crops, while at the same time still producing increased yield, and this is why plant biotechnology is important. Genetically modified crops have had a bad media image, but he explained that there was no need to fear them. He himself is involved in some of the processes for getting them legalized. They are perfectly safe. They go through a huge process of scrutiny by highly trained people. We can demonstrate that all the GM crops coming to markets are essentially identical to the crops that would be preceded by conventional plant breeding in terms of safety, he added. Recently, the EU spent more than 200 million euros funding independent research to examine the safety of GM plants and concluded that they were as safe as non-GM crops. So how was your note-taking? That was just for your own reference on whether or not you understood how these note-taking strategies effectively helps you. We're now going to go on to the next strategy, which is paraphrasing. So paraphrasing might seemingly be very close to summarizing at the beginning. But what is particular about paraphrasing is that it focuses on the most important information and ensures that your understanding of the author's point of view is accurate. So when you encounter a very difficult text, what you need to do is that you need to stop and think after each paragraph on whether or not it may be useful to you. Essentially, paraphrasing involves rewriting the original passage using your own words. Paraphrase will be slightly different from summarizing in terms of length. When we talk about summarizing, we say that it needs to be shorter than the original length. With paraphrasing, it should be in a similar length as the original text. Now, what we're going to do is that we're going to look at this particular segment of text. You're going to read it, and then we're going to try to see whether or not we can successfully paraphrase it. Let's go. Now that we've read the text, let's read this paraphrase together. Alice, 1989, argues that economic competition is at the basis of many of the world's problems, and only by seeing ourselves as a single human family without the separation of national boundaries can we begin to erase the world's tensions and inequalities. So, is this a good paraphrase? What kind of techniques can you see from this particular paraphrase that are different from the original text? We're going to go through them one by one together. So the first technique we can look at is changing the sentence structure. So originally, you will see that the main topic could be a subject. By changing the sentence structure, it becomes an object. By doing so, we're not changing the meaning of the author, but we are changing the structure of the text. The second thing is using synonyms. So in the original text, we're seeing the word people-to-people linkage. In the paraphrase, we've changed it using a single human family. Again, not changing the meaning, but changing the text. A second example would be in the original text, it talked about irrespective of national borders. In the paraphrase, we changed it to without the separation of national boundaries. Again, changing the text without changing the meaning. We also use synonyms on particular words. In the original text, it talked about ameliorate. So we use the synonym erase to replace it without changing the meaning. That's very important. So what are some of the tips I can give you in terms of how to successfully paraphrase? Number one, you must read the entire text and understand fully of the author's explicit and implicit meaning. You must rewrite the text in your original words, but you can allow 2 to 3 main keywords from the original text to appear in your paraphrase. You need to make sure you use different synonyms, so essentially different words but with the same meaning without changing the meaning of the text. You can also change the sentence structure, you can change the voice, so from passive to active or vice versa. You can change the part of speech, so from a noun to a verb, or you can reduce clauses to a phrase or to a word if that's possible. Now, what you need to remember is that you cannot change technical words. That includes number or other statistical facts that are presented in the original text. At last, you must ensure you cite correctly because remember, you do not want to plagiarize. Now, we're going to go into the second part of today's lesson. Reflect. What is reflection? Essentially, reflection is something that you do when you're reading a text. You immerse yourself into it. You're stepping into the shoe of the author. Once you've engaged with it, you're forming your own thoughts and ideas and feelings. So once you have made this connection with the reading, it actually helps you to deepen your memory of it. So in the future, once you decide to use it, you'll become more handy. Now, when you're reflecting on a piece of text, the first step you will need to do is responding to it. When you respond to the text, it means that you have understood it and be able to form your opinions. Furthermore, you'll be able to write a response to it. During the process, you will be able to defend your personal opinion using the data you've collected from the original text as well as your own opinion. So how do you do that? How do you respond to a text? The first thing you need to do is you need to think, how is this text related to you? Especially on a personal level. How does it relate to you in terms of the past, present, and future? Next, how much of the text actually agrees or disagrees with your own personal opinions or your own belief system? Do they clash with what you'll consider right or wrong? When you're rebuttaling or agree with the opinion from the text, make sure that you are actually quoting from the original text so that your arguments are valid and complete. Next, once you read the text, what did you learn from it? And how much of your own view or opinion were actually challenged by the text? If so, and during the process, did the text communicate to you at all? And how they have done that? Again, make sure you give specific example from the text to support your point. Number 4, what can you say about the text? What kind of good things can you say about them? What problems did you have with it? Again, provide your arguments with example from the text. Now going into the feeling part, how much did you enjoy the text or not? Was it entertaining? Was it a work of art? And then you look at the overall feeling, and then you look at your overall reaction to the text. And think to yourself, in the future, would you like to read a similar style of text? Would you like to read the text by the same author again? Why and why not? And then further, think, who would you recommend this text to? Next, during the process of reflecting, you need to start drawing conclusions. Drawing conclusions is essentially reading between the lines. When you read between the lines, you're making connection between the text and its implied meaning, either derived from your personal experiences or prior knowledges. But what you need to be aware of is that drawing a conclusion is different from making inferences. An inference is made based on what you've just read, and that its meaning may be implied or expressed explicitly by the author. Whereas drawing a conclusion is based on the inferences you've just gathered from the text in order to make a judgment or decision about what might happen next as a result of this text. And so how do we draw successful conclusions? Number 1, you need to make sure you read the text fully and carefully to ensure you have not misunderstood anything. Next, you're going to make some inferences from the text based on your personal experiences or prior knowledge. Then you're going to draw a conclusion based on the inferences you've just made. So now we're going to look at another text. This text will be talking about hybrid cars. So based on this text, what kind of conclusions can you draw from it? What kind of inferences can you make to help you successfully draw these conclusions? Good luck and let's go. Hybrid cars are good for the environment, but they may not perform as well as cars that run only on gasoline. The Toyota Prius gets great gas mileage and has low emission, making it a good green option. However, many people think that it is unattractive. The Prius also cannot accelerate as quickly as other models and cannot hold as many passengers as the large gas-fueled SUVs and vans. Compared to similar gas-fuel options, hybrid car also costs more money up front. A new hybrid car costs almost $3,500 more than the same car configured to run just on gasoline. So what we're going to do is we're going to test whether or not you actually understood the inferences or the conclusion this text has made. There are 4 different options here. You're going to read through all of them and let me know, are they correct or incorrect based on the inferences and the conclusion you've just made. So number 1, hybrid cars are more dangerous than the other option. This will be false, because in the original text, there's actually nothing about car safety. How about number 2? Hybrid cars may not be the best choice for everyone. Now, this could be inferred from the text. If a person had a large family who was short on money or need a car that will accelerate quickly, a hybrid might not be the best option. So this is correct. Let's look at option number 3. Toyota is making a lot of money from the Prius. This might not be as good an answer, simply because you don't know how much it costs Toyota to make these cars, and you do not have the statistic on how much they sell. So in this case, you cannot infer that they do not make that much money. That is not something that you can get from the text. Let's look at number 4. Cars that use gasoline are going to destroy the environment. Although this is a statement that we think is true, based on our own experience and prior knowledge, this is not something that was mentioned in a paragraph, therefore this argument cannot be supported. So now, based on the inferences we just talked about, what kind of conclusion can we draw? Let's look at option 1. Cars that use gasoline are going to destroy the environment. Number 2, a less expensive and more functional design hybrid car is needed for everyone. And number 3, hybrid cars are not as popular as we think due to some drawbacks. All these are conclusions we can make logically, critically, and persuasively based on the inferences and the facts that are presented in the reading. So, in today's lesson, we discuss, review, and reflect these 2 different strategies that can effectively help you to grasp the meaning of the author as well as retaining it for long-term memory and future use. I hope today's lesson has been useful to you. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.